Hello everyone. This is the first week of my 4-week political campaign, and I'm focusing on the issue of raising the quality of political dialogue. In this first week, as part of the theme, the policy area or theme of democracy, we're looking at participation in politics. And the purpose of this short video is to just make a number of reflections about a dialogue I had with Leroy Addison and Matthew Gordon. That dialogue has been recorded and is uploaded onto this website, and I hope you've had a chance to listen to it because I think it was a great conversation and many interesting things have come out of it. I just want to briefly say how I think of the term dialogue. To me, it is an intentional conversation, if you like. So it would be a conversation that would be entered into with the intention to deeply listen and to learn something new. One way of assessing the quality of dialogue, or in this case political dialogue, is to use the lens of how inclusive has the dialogue been, how insightful is it, and how integrative is it. Now, this is not the only lens, I'm sure, for measuring the quality of dialogue, but this is the one that I've been using and along with my community of practice. So if we use this particular lens to look at the dialogue with Leroy and Matthew, was it inclusive? Well, we did make an effort to engage people of the young age group. We were very interested to hear from first-time voters, so it was great to have Leroy along. And it was wonderful to have another young person who's obviously very engaged in the whole area of participation in political process. And Matthew's business is built on that, on engaging people. So perhaps you could say that it was inclusive. Was it insightful? To a degree, perhaps you could say that it was. I recall that during the conversation there were some comments made about the political context at the moment in Australia being quite an old-style authoritarian approach, and there was an urge that was being felt in the community, perhaps particularly among young people, I don't know, for that to change to a more inclusive type of politics. So I think that puts the dialogue into some sort of a cultural context of big shifts that are happening, and perhaps they mightn't even be just in Australia, they might be global as well, but that would be another conversation. And was it integrative? Was the conversation integrative? Well, I was happy. I don't think we had a broad range of views, particularly in this three-way conversation. We perhaps shared a lot of views, but there was a reference made. Matthew was speaking about a leadership program that he'd been part of, and I thought it was very interesting that he spoke about a model whereby one person would speak from the left, one person from the right, and then the next person about a way forward. And I think that's a great example of what an integrative model can look like. There is a range of views considered, respected, and yet there is an urge to go forward at the same time. So just to speak very briefly about some of the themes that arose or were brought out during the conversation. I'm speaking on a day today when the electoral rolls are closing for our upcoming federal election, and I heard on the radio this morning that it's possible that only about half 18-year-olds in Australia are enrolled to vote. So the question for me arises, is it just apathy? Is there apathy towards the political process? And I think coming out of this conversation with Matthew and Leroy, it's definitely not apathy. I think it was very clear that Leroy wanted to be involved in politics. He accepted the invitation to be involved in this dialogue for a start, which says something, I believe. But he also expressed the desire to learn more about political processes, but also not to be involved in just any old way. He wanted to be involved in a meaningful way, and he thought that people should be voting from a position of having good information. And Matthew, of course, as I mentioned, he's built his business on the whole theme of getting people to participate in political process. So I don't think that we were hearing apathy in this conversation. I think there was a very strong theme about wanting change, and the description that I was hearing about current politics and the skill sets and the focus that politicians have at the moment, whereby option A might be developed and option B, and then a lot of effort goes into selling one option or the other. That was a sort of a brief description of what's happening currently, but there's a great desire for change, and through examples, like in Indi, another model was being put forward, and that was one of much greater community participation in the dialogue process, in the decision-making process, but also interesting to me was actually in the problem-solving process as well. I think Matthew and Leroy were showing a great deal of interest in the potential for the community to solve some of these wicked problems that we're currently being faced with. And the other interesting thing I thought that was raised was the role of technology in all this, that technology has actually been or can be an enabler for this shift towards community participation. So they were just some of my brief reflections. I would love to invite you to also be part of this conversation. You can go to my Facebook page, which is www.meredithurie.com/FB for Facebook. Please share your views there about this whole theme of participation in politics. I'd love to have lots of different opinions and to have a good conversation starting there. So thank you very much for listening to me, and please continue to follow on with this political conversation.